Hello everyone, my name is Luis Espinoza, and the question for this project is what type of pacing strategy should be used for long distance running events? For example, a half a marathon and a full marathon. Why did I choose this topic? So, currently I am a PE teacher, I am also a soccer coach. This question interests me because I want to coach multiple sports throughout my career. This may eventually involve track and field or cross country. Anyhow, all sports need conditioning, so I plan to train my players through some endurance runnings. It is important to know the pace that different distances require to acquire the best performance in a race. And that's what we're going to learn today. Okay, my key terms for this project is lactate threshold and predicting endurance performance. So lactate threshold is the maximum effort or intensity that an athlete can maintain for an extended period of time before accumulating lactate in the blood. Predicting endurance performance is just simply the pace and time for distance races. And I would like to note that lactate threshold is a good predictor of submaximal fitness. For example, a running speed or pace that can be maintained over a prolonged period of time without fatiguing. So Noakes mentioned that pace is the key to success for endurance performances. There are many ways to strategize for a running event. Some may use heart rate monitors, stride frequency, perceived exertion, or percent of VO2 max. There is no right or wrong way to control your pace. For the most part, many of these correlate to one another. Today we are going to specifically use lactate threshold to indicate a running pace over long distance runs, for example half marathons or full marathons. So lactic acid is a byproduct of the anaerobic glycolysis. At low running pace, lactate levels remain low. As running pace increases, lactate levels increase. At this point, the anaerobic glycolysis starts to contribute at a greater rate to generate ATP in order to withstand that intensity. Unfortunately, when sustaining these higher levels of intensity, the body begins to fatigue. The lactate levels are a result of the difference between production and use. Some lactic acid is used by the muscles, some is transported to other muscles or organs via the blood. The current lactic acid in the blood is how we can read our lactic levels. During a graded exercise test, multiple fingerprints are taken as the intensity increases. The following graph right here, as you see, it shows the increase in blood lactate in correlation with increasing the speeds. This is how you can identify your lactate threshold. In classic studies, lactic acid was believed to cause fatigue, cramps, side stitch, post-exercise soreness, and protein deterioration due to high acidity. But now we know that lactic acid is used as a fuel source during exercise. With increasing intensities, the rate of lactic acid production increases and accumulates in the blood. Even though lactic acid is not producing any harm, it shows an indication of the metabolism working harder, and which leads to fatigue. When pacing at higher intensity zones, you can only last so long. There are charts to help predict lactic acid levels based on your heart rate. All you need to know is your heart rate, your max heart rate. You can find your max heart rate by running with a heart rate monitor and grade your intensity every 3 minutes on a track over 10 to 20 minutes. Dock your final heart rate when you run at your full potential and are forced to stop due to fatigue. That's how you find your heart rate max. As you see in the chart, level 2, you can maintain that pace for 1 to 3 hours. This is the pace that we want for marathons, and if you start running at zone 3, our energy will be limited and then we fatigue. Okay, so by now we learned that lactate threshold is a good predictor of submaximal exercises. For example, the pace that we can maintain over a prolonged period of time without fatiguing. Once we know our lactic threshold, we can run at a slightly lower speed or pace to avoid lactic acid accumulation. At this point, our pace is within a safe intensity zone. Keep in mind that many other physiological factors correlate during this training zone. These other factors can can help maintain a steady lactic acid level. For example, within an intensity zone, we have a steady pace, a steady heart rate, and a steady VO2 percentage. And in essence, we want to maintain an effective VO2 percentage that we can endure over a long distance, which is right under LT2 in this chart. Therefore, we can then maintain an intensity zone by keeping track of our speed or heart rate throughout the race. If reaching LT2, the level of effort and fatigue is high. So it is important to stay right under LT2 for a half marathon or a full marathon run. I also read a few studies for this presentation. This one here is plasma lactate accumulation and distance running performance. For this study, 18 subjects ran on a treadmill to pinpoint the onset of plasma lactate accumulation. From there, the runners were given a pace that utilizes the largest possible VO2, but is still just below the plasma lactate threshold. This would be their running economy, essentially. The distance they raced at were 3.2 kilometers, 9.7, 15, 19.3, and 42 kilometers. So they raced 5 different distances. When running the 42 kilometer, runners actually maintain an average velocity slightly above their onset of plasma lactate accumulation. You may surpass this speed, but as mentioned earlier, your energy will be limited. The table here shows the speeds at which they were racing. As you see, the pace slightly drops within longer distances. In correlation with VO2 being an indicator of the pace, these pace match the VO2 recommendations for marathon runners. As you see, the 42 kilometer was ran at 75% of VO2 max. Although this varies between athletes, we are in the ballpark for pace recommendations. So in summary, the onset of plasma lactate accumulation corresponds with VO2 max percentages, and which sets a steady race pace for long distance races. Here is another study. Prediction of race pace and long distance running from lactate concentration around race pace. The aim of the study was to develop a simple equation for predicting the performance in a half marathon and a full marathon using blood lactate concentration close to race pace. For testing, subjects ran 2 different speeds. Blood lactate levels were recorded at a speed slightly lower than competition expected race pace and a speed slightly faster than competition expected race pace. The results sustained in the study presented 2 equations for predicting performance in a half marathon and a full marathon race. For these equations, you just plug in your speeds and lactate levels to predict the pace for those distances. So what type of pacing strategy should be used for long distance running events? Ideally, the race pace should be slightly under the lactate threshold. As you're reaching the end of the race, you may want to increase your intensity and plan to finish the race before the onset of fatigue. So remember those training zones I mentioned. I would like to stay underneath that lactate threshold. And then as you're getting close to the race, you might increase that intensity, because remember how in those zones it was showing how you could only last so long with that intensity. So for example, I remember seeing zone 3 was 1 hour long. You could only withstand that amount of the intensity for 1 hour. After that, you hit fatigue. So I would be in a safe zone throughout my race, and then as I'm getting close to the end, I may use that last bit of energy. And so in the last distance of the race, I like to finish strong. I always say this to myself: I'm going to waste my last energy here because I don't need it anymore, and I give it everything else that I have left in the tank. So that's how I like to finish a race. And these are my references here. So I hope my presentation was easy to follow and you guys learned a lot. And I just want to say thanks for watching.